This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome to episode number 70, the big 7-0 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Jerome Chirco, alongside my sidekick, my partner in crime, as I label him, the Doc, from Doc and Jock, John Macaroon. John, how's it going?
Vito, it's always good to check in with you. Missed having you around the studios, and my goodness, you had yourself a wild weekend, a great Saturday watching high school basketball. Proud of you, man. I don't know. I'm a fan of basketball, but to watch and cover that many basketball games, my goodness, man. Good stuff. It was great coverage. I followed along on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. Kudos to you, man. Good stuff.
And I did it for our sponsor, Top Cat Sales, via at Team Top Cat on Twitter. A long day for me that started at noon. I got there a little bit before noon for the first game, and it was River Rouge against Detroit Renaissance. So two Team Top Cat schools head-to-head. That was good to see those two schools clash with one another. And the nightcap was the marquee matchup of the whole entire Horatio Williams Tip-Off Classic. It featured Dakota, now a Nike school. They kind of sold their souls to Nike, as I would like to say, from working at Top Cat Sales, and Adidas distribution company now. And Dakota won the game, and Dakota beat in that matchup Detroit Pershing, who is a Top Cat school now. So Team Adidas and then Team Nike and Dakota. Dakota, a little bit too much for Pershing to handle. Pershing made it a game in the grand scheme of things, and especially down the wire, but Dakota, Jermaine Jackson Jr., and if that name rings a bell, it's because his father is an assistant coach at Detroit Mercy under Bakari Alexander, a team that we now cover here at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Very interesting stuff. So, this episode of Tigers Talk, number 70, you got it jam-packed. What do you got this week for us?
I do. 3 guests, including my brother and Kyle O'Connor, and kind of a newbie, a guy that hasn't been on the pod in a long time now, and Michael Natelli, formerly of Call to the Pen, a site that I used to write for, that he used to write for now as well. He's like a Washington Nationals guru. And then Kyle O'Connor's our Cubs reporter. Dominic is like our Midwest baseball reporter, really all baseball. You know, all 30 ball clubs he can cover very well, and especially his Chicago White Sox, who had a busy winter meetings, didn't they, Doc? Tigers, not so much. White Sox, a big amount.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. Chris Sale, gone. They got their haul that they were looking for. It'll be interesting to see how that's going to work out. But the Tigers also, now not related to personnel, have made some moves. Ex-Tiger Gerald Lair is going to manage in Single A. He's going to start his career in managing at the Single A level. And you have a situation where not a big splash, but an old friend is returning back to the Tigers on a minor league deal. Omar Infante is returning. And the Tigers did make a move in the Rule 5 draft, picking up, I believe, a left-handed pitcher from Kansas City.
Who cares about either, right? Really, not big moves during the winter meetings. Nothing, no big splashes, no big trades of JD Martinez or Ian Kinsler. I was wrong, horribly wrong on my prediction. I said that one of those two guys would be dealt by the end of the winter meetings, and guess what happened? Nada. No big movement by the front office of the Tigers. Al Avila changed course, changed his tone about the Tigers and what he wanted to do with the Tigers at the winter meetings. And, you know, he had made the big splash in news and what he said at the end of the season, saying that they were operating above their means for way too long. And then it sounded like they were going to cheapen their payroll and get younger. You know what? They didn't. They didn't do really at all any of those two things yet. And will they? Still time will tell. And I got to believe they will make a move such as dealing Ian Kinsler. Dodgers still have that huge void at second base. Maybe they acquire Ian Kinsler. And I wouldn't mind seeing him be dealt. But if you have changed course and do want to contend truly in 2017 now, you've got to keep JD Martinez on your ball club.
Okay. So you're saying you do not care about the acquisition of Daniel Stumpf in the Rule 5. And it's very interesting to read about it. It stipulates that players selected must remain on your club for a full year. If not, then he must go back to the Royals.
Yep,
and right now, it costs the Tigers 100 G's. And if he goes back, it will half will come back. Half of the money will come back if he ends up going back to the Royals. And so it's another reliever. It's something that
we just got a crummy reliever, though, already from the Halos and dealing Cameron Maben for a deal that was not purely baseball related. It was purely a salary dump. I didn't like that. And the Rule 5 draft, it's a crapshoot. You never know what you're going to get, and that's why it's only a cool 100 G's, which is a lot for you and I. I wish we could gain that in revenue per year, right? At the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, we're making pennies compared to that. But the thing is, for a ball club operating on a payroll of 170 mil plus, and as it has been annually of late, at least for the Tigers, that's nothing for them to spend 100, G's on a guy in the Rule 5 draft. And like I said, we can't put any kind of equity into that acquisition at this point, Doc.
And I'm very interested to see what your guests think and what you think, but the speculation and what a lot of people are talking about is the Detroit Tigers are probably going into 2017 with a roster very similar to 2016, and they're going to try to spin it. They're going to try to spin it in that, you know what? We got a young pitching staff. Maybe if we upgrade a couple positions at the bullpen, maybe if we go with a rotation of Boyd and Norris to fill out the top three, maybe, just maybe, we could have a competitive ball club if Brad Ausmus and the squad can improve just a little bit. They weren't that far away from winning the division, so they're trying to spin it that way. In my opinion, though, it just kind of goes to show you that when you put out there and you say things and you spin and you put a perception out there in terms of what you're trying to do to a ball club, it's very important what you say. And the Tigers are not going to just give away their high-priced talent, but in the end, because of some mistakes that Al Avila made, it doesn't look like they're going to be able to make any solid moves prior to the start of 2017. Maybe a couple minor moves here and there. Maybe a trade could work out. But a good point that was brought up by a buddy of mine that texted me, he said, you know what? The Tigers might just hold on and see what they do up until the start of the season. Then going up until the All-Star break, maybe, just maybe, if it bottoms out, you go, you know what, this is officially it, and maybe you could trade some of these guys at the deadline for more than you probably could now. So maybe look for the Tigers to wait and see if it bottoms out, if they're well under 500, or if they're out of it, then you might get more value during the season than you could maybe right now. So it's a good point by my buddy.
Who's your buddy? I would like to know his name. You got to reveal his name. No, you don't want to do that right to your buddy. But
I can't reveal the sources according to some journalist friends that I have.
Can't reveal the big names that are giving you the inside scoops here, huh? But I wanted to say to you in not countering, but in following up to your point made there, is that Tigers are in no rush to deal really any of these guys. There's no rush. Like the White Sox, they still might be wheeling and dealing. They already dealt Chris Sale, already dealt Adam Eaton. But the Tigers now, who didn't deal anybody, still might deal somebody this offseason, if not more than one person, of high quality worth, and value to the Tigers roster from 2016 specifically. But also they might wheel and deal some guys leading up to the non-waiver trade deadline come 2017. So it still might be a lot of things that happen that Al Avila said that we thought would happen maybe earlier and maybe by the winter meetings and the end of the winter meetings that didn't happen, that still at the same time could happen. So I could still see a move or two being made by the Tigers, well, this offseason first and foremost, but leading up to that non-waiver trade deadline, which is that big window for trades to be made. And if your team is out of it, as if the Tigers, Tigers could be. If that's the case, then come the non-waiver trade deadline in 2017, Tigers, I think, will move on from guys and look to the future more and more, because now they might be playing it safe, and they do want to see, I would imagine, what they do in the first half. Then they go from there. If you're in it, you make a move or two to upgrade your roster. If not, you kind of just start the reboot officially. And the scenario for the Tigers, rebooting or not, the big issue could be a problematic thing to bring up regarding that official reboot for the Tigers, if they were to go down that route right now, would be that if you're going to deal one of the guys to start a reboot, you kind of have to go all in, right? It's like you deal one guy, you got to deal everybody then. It's not worth it just to deal one guy. Unless I'll bring up this as a counterpoint. If you deal Ian Kinsler, I'm fine with dealing just him. Because I think you can still deal him, get younger at second base, and win at least somewhat, enough to contend in 2017 at least. Now, if you deal JD Martinez, the full-fledged reboot or rebuild mode has to start. You can't just deal JD Martinez and expect that that's going, not going to be too much, and that it's not going to prevent you from contending in 2017, because it will prevent you from contending by dealing him. That's why they got to go all in. If they deal JD Martinez, it's worth it to go all in. It's not worth it just to deal him, because then if you do and you don't do anything else, then it was stupid from the start, for dealing JD Martinez, in my opinion, Doc. I
understand, and it's going to be interesting to see what the plan is how the plan is going to evolve. It'll shed light into kind of what their thinking is in terms of the future of the ball club. But I'm really believing that they're going to try to sell that we can make maybe one more stab at it with the group of guys, and you just maybe replace Cameron Maybin with Jacoby Jones if he hits, or if we just improve the bullpen a little bit and bring down the number of runs. But I'm going to bring up a key stat later on in the podcast when it gets back to my turn and what we call this a tease. I got something that the Tigers and a stat that is really overwhelming that if they improve upon could really help the ball club next season. But who's up first in your guest list, sir? Who are we dialing up?
Now, a guy who covers a team that is going all in to win in 2017. That is Michael Natelli, who is a guy that covers the Washington Nationals. We'll be right back with him.
All right, Vito, I'll dial up Michael right now.
And as Doc said, Michael Natelli is now joining us here on episode number 70 of Tigers Talk. Michael, how's it going?
How you doing, Vito?
Very good. And it's been a long time since we last chatted about your Nationals, and they made a big move, getting Adam Eaton to say the least. And they had to give up their prize pitching prospect and number one pitching spec in all of baseball, according to many outlets, in Lucas Giolito, who headed to the White Sox, is now headed to the White Sox in a deal that landed the Nats Adam Eaton. What was your first reaction when that deal went down, Michael?
So I originally raised my eyes. I'm a bigger Adam fan than most. And so in hindsight, though, I've started to really warm up to the move. It seems like from most reports, the Nationals had started to sour on Giolito. So being able to package him in this deal and get a guy who's under control for the long term in Eden, I thought was a great move. You look at Jason Wirtz under contract for 1 more year. Bryce Harper's under contract for 2 more years. Daniel Murphy's under contract for 2 more years. Strasburg can opt out after 3 more years if he decides to. And to get a guy they can keep for 5 years. Giolito is definitely having some growing pains this past year. I don't mean in terms of injuries, but in terms of just struggling. And, they've decided that this is their window, so they don't have time to let him sort of go through those motions. So it looked like Ronaldo Lopez, of that 3 players, was going to be the only one who stayed on the team entering 2017. So you're essentially giving up Lopez for Eaton in the 2017 sense, which is not a bad move. Lopez probably wasn't going to be in the rotation. He was going to fill more of an Andrew Miller kind of role out of the bullpen. But I love the move. I think that Eden has, phenomenal defense. He's going to be a great 1 or 2 hitter behind or in front of Trey Turner, I think. And I really love the move personally.
You brought up, they had to give up Reynaldo Lopez, number 8 pitching prospect in all of baseball. And then also, one of the 3 guys that you said they had to give up for Eaton was also Dane Dunning. Now, Dunning, a first runner this past summer by the Nationals. So it wasn't just Giolito. It wasn't just him that was given up, or even Reynaldo Lopez. And those are 2 really good prospects. Also, Dane Dunning. So is it fair to say the Nats paid a steep price, and maybe even too steep of a price?
Yeah, I think that's sort of going to always be the case in moves like this when you're talking about controllable players who bring sort of almost all 5 tools. I think Eden does. But I think that, Mike Rizzo has generally been pretty good about not giving up too much in the past, so he decided that he needed to make the move no matter what it took. He lost out on Chris Sale when Chris Sale was traded to the Boston Red Sox. It sounded like the Nationals were inquiring with just about everybody, but just couldn't seem to get a deal done. And I think Rizzo is deciding that he needed to get something done. This move just reeks of just almost desperation, but at the same time strategic desperation. If you look at the Nationals farm system, they still have Victor Robles they hung on to. Eric Petty is still a top 100 pitching prospect. They still have their first rounder from last year, whose name is Carter Kieboom. He's a shortstop. They have Drew Ward, Austin Boss, who I think could absolutely contribute in the big leagues either this year or next year. Andrew Stevenson's progressing. A.J. Cole is still there. Coda Glover, who came up this past year. We've seen this before where the Nationals farm system just didn't seem that impressive on paper, but they have lots of guys who just developed into role players or sort of supplementary pieces. And I think that they have that, in full force still in their farm system. So they overpaid, to say the least, but I don't think that it's such a bad move in the sense of, emptying out the farm and having nothing left, because they definitely have more than enough pieces to get them by in the future.
Yeah, I felt like they were desperate, as you said, maybe reached a little bit in what they had to give up to attain Adam Eaton. What all the prospects will amount to, I think, is a concern for Nationals long term. But if you do want to win in the immediate future, they got a quality and very quality outfielder in Eaton. And it seems like that losing out on Chris Sale, you already know it kind of sped up, expedited this process of the Nationals to get somebody else of very high quality and worth, such as Eaton. And if they didn't get Eaton, they would have been the team that was left out and really the team that would have become the losers of the winter meetings, in my opinion. So I think they felt they had to make the move because of that. And because, another analogy you could use is that they would have been the bridesmaid, right? The bridesmaids, I guess, big time of the winter meetings as well, if they would have lost out on Eaton as well as Chris Sale, which they did lose out to the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think the other thing to pay attention to with Eaton is his cost controllability. He's signed, including the 2 club options for 5 years, 3 years plus the 2 club options for about $35.5 million, which if you consider the Nationals TV contract situation right now, they're sort of disputing with Masson, who's their broadcast partner, over money because it's owned by the Orioles owner, Peter Angelos. And so the way that it worked out when the Nationals came to D.C. is they get about 35% of the TV revenue from Masson, while the Orioles get about 65%. And it's really hurt them financially. You've seen lots of deferred contracts. They offered roughly the same amount of money to Jason Hayward last offseason that the Cubs did, but with lots of deferred payments, and that's why Hayward ultimately went to the Cubs. The same way it's structured with Max Scherzer's contract. He has lots of backloaded money, and it's hurt them a lot in free agency. So having a guy like Eaton who has, not a whole lot of financial commitment to him, and they also get to hang on to him for a long time, there's a much more added value for a team like the Nationals, who's currently, I don't want to say struggling financially, but in terms of acquiring big-name players, it's hurt them in a big way. So being able to add a guy like that for the long term without much financial commitment has a lot more value to them than teams like the Yankees or the Dodgers.
Absolutely.
So they were willing to overpay for that reason.
Yeah, quality cost control with Eaton under contract, like you said. And also, you noted how they've lost out on free agents in the past. And they might lose out on a guy they have on their team right now and being able to re-sign him. And he's going to be this big piece available on the open market in the very near future. That is the man, Bryce Harper of the Nationals. Their key piece offensively, a guy they really can't afford to lose. But do you think they will end up losing him to another ball club such as the Yankees in free agency because his price tag will be just way too darn high for the Nationals?
Yeah, if I'm a betting man, I'm betting that he's not going to be in Washington beyond 2018. Bryce Harper is a competitive guy, so I think that if they come close to the World Series and he continues to have an injury history like he has in the past, I could see him maybe signing a 1-year deal with them in the offseason to try and regain his value, but I don't think that there's any sort of long-term deal that keeps him in Washington. He grew up a Yankee fan. That short porch in right field of the Yankee Stadium was just crying out to him right now. I can see that. He loves the big market. I could totally see a situation where the Yankees go after him and Trout with the prospect capital they have and just pair those two in that same outfield, which would be just insane. Boston's also a player with the pesky pullout in right field. The Dodgers are obviously going to be in the running. I don't think that Harper's going to be staying long term.
And now, how about the price tag for Harper for anybody to sign him? It sounds like he's aiming to become the first $400 million man in Major League Baseball history. Is he worth that, Michael, in your opinion?
Is anyone worth any of the money they're getting these days? I think that's sort of the question. You look at Bryce Harper, I think that there's far more name value. There's far more value as a center fielder for him because of what he brings with the power than there is in right field so far. I think he could definitely prove me wrong this year and next year. He's been getting hurt a lot with his, and then also playing through injuries. It sounds like he was playing through either a hip injury or a rib injury or something like that this past year that really apparently threw off his game. So if he can get it together, he can play healthy and he can be consistent and that he can cover the outside of the plate, I think that he will absolutely be, relative to how baseball contracts work, he'll be worth it. But he has a ways to go. I definitely think that he'll get the money just because of the fact that he is Bryce Harper. He has that name brand. He has that, marketing value. He also has the great arm in right field, the power, and just the middle of the order threat presence about him. But would I spend it as the Nationals? I personally would.
Yeah, there has to be some concern. I know he was battling the injury bug, as you noted, in 2016, but a lot of the war over the past 3 seasons that he's accumulated with the Nationals has been in large part due to his 2015 NL MVP campaign. So really outside of that 2015 season of Harper, he really hasn't been a standout performer on a consistent game-to-game basis. And we saw where his war was in 2016. It wasn't standoutish. And it's for sure not the war that a guy who is worth that kind of a contract, that much money really should be getting. It should be a lot more war that he's putting up if he's going to be worth that much money. It sounds like you're also speaking volumes to that. And also, though, at the same time, you're a believer in the fact that, well, he's got so much potential in him, right, stored up in him that he can become worth that much at some point. And then you also brought up, well, nobody's really worth all that much money anyways at the same time.
Well, not only that, but keep in mind, Manny Machado is also going to be a free agent that winter, potentially Clayton Kershaw as well. So teams are going to be throwing the money around. And if I'm an investor, I'm putting that money into Manny Machado with his, he seems to have a far better injury history. He had the season-ending injury right at the very end against the Rays a couple years ago, but he's seemed to come back just fine. And, putting a guy like that at shortstop to me seems like a far more valuable investment than a guy who plays right field.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, if Harper gets anywhere close to that, will be asking for a lot more money, such as even Mike Trout maybe will need to renegotiate his deal after Harper gets anything close to that in that free agent class. And I think Machado, too, definitely worth as much money as he will get in the current state of baseball. Now, I wanted to ask you, after the Nats lost out on Chris Sale, is there a move that they could make to maybe get somebody at least close to his caliber for their rotation, or maybe another spot on their ball club that you think they might be looking to attain before the end of this offseason?
I don't think that they're going to address their rotation at this point unless someone has some sort of off-season injury. They have the pitching depth to be just fine, I think. There's been talks of them wanting to move Gio Gonzalez just because of the fact that he's been very inconsistent in the last couple of years, but it sounds like at this point, unless some other big name becomes available, which it sounds like the Athletics aren't selling on Sonny Gray, and the Rays are just having way too high of asking prices on their stable of young arms, I think they're going to stand pat with the starting rotation. I do think that they're going to look for a closer at this point because it looks like Sean Kelly's in line to take over the closing role, and with his injury history, they don't want to rely on that. There's an echelon of names that have been thrown around. Francisco Rodriguez on the Tigers, David Robertson from the White Sox, Alex Colomé from the Rays, even Sean Doolittle from the Athletics have been thrown around. I mean, half the closers in baseball have been tied to the Nationals at this point. And Drew Storen's available on the free agent market, which I doubt that there's a reunion there, but it's always fun to think about what if with him. But who knows where they're going to go at this point. There's so many different names, both on the free agent market. They already lost out on Kenley Jansen and Aroldis Chapman, but there's a few more names out there, Greg Holland, Brad Ziegler. It's anyone's guess at this point how they handle that, but I do think they're going to try to address the closer spot. And then one other guy I would keep an eye on is Brandon Moss. I think that he is just sort of, I've said from the beginning of the offseason, the perfect fit for the Nationals. He can cover first base, left field, and right field. And if you think about sort of the three guys who've gotten hurt more than anyone on the Nationals, it's Jason Worth, Ryan Zimmerman, and Bryce Harper. So having a guy like that who can slot in and can hit as a DH during interleague, I think would be just perfect for them.
And you brought up the relief pitchers. There's still many out there on the cheap you can attain, and the White Sox are still looking to make moves, it seems like. So David Robertson, Tigers might move K-Rod, and we know it as Tigers prognosticators, pundits, whatever you want to call us here at Tigers Talk. So it looks like the Nats still might be in the market for something else this offseason. And Michael Natelli, with that, my man, thank you very much for all your time on this week's edition of Tigers Talk.
Yeah, take care, Vito.
And back on episode 70 of Tigers Talk, after that conversation with Michael Natelli, we learned about the Nationals, what they're looking to do maybe now going forward, what they have done already in getting Adam Eaton. He thinks it was worth the price, but also a steep price at the same time that the Nationals had to pay to attain Adam Eaton, Doc.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, our first time out of this podcast. When we come back, who's up next on the docket?
We'll have my brother, mi hermano, Dominic Chirco, joining us. Hey guys, it's Vito Chirco here from Top Cat Sales in downtown Royal Oak. Are you looking for team apparel for your high school, your club sports team, or your corporation? Well, if so, then look no further than Top Cat Sales, located on the east side of Main Street in downtown Royal Oak, between 11 and 12 Mile. Through founder and former University of Michigan quarterback John Wangler's leadership, Top Cat Sales has developed a tradition of selling and distributing custom Adidas team apparel with the very highest quality and the very best service. So get your organization, your school or club team all in with Adidas today by going online to TopCatTeamSales.com. Once again, the website for Top Cat Sales is TopCatTeamSales.com. And remember to follow Top Cat Sales on Twitter at Team Top Cat. And now, joining me on episode 70 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company is mi hermano, Dominic Joseph Chirco. Dom, how's it going?
Good. Winter meetings just wrapped up, and you know that I'm an excited White Sox fan.
Yeah, happy times, right? Very happy times for the White Sox with what they were able to acquire, dealing Chris Sale and Adam Eaton. And tell me now, how happy did the returns make you feel as a White Sox fan?
Well, as a White Sox fan, you have to feel elated. The White Sox have been in the cellar for a while. They haven't made the playoffs since 2008. The farm system has been pretty crappy. You can say it's pretty barren. There hasn't been too much overtake from fringe prospects. Haven't panned out. Position prospects really haven't panned out. the White Sox really haven't had a successful tenured White Sox prospects at third baseman Joe Creedy. So it's definitely refreshing to see the White Sox getting the young guys. And I think it's something the fans can come together, and fans will be excited about going to the games, even though the White Sox will be bad. Now they know they're going to be bad. They're not going to be misled by adding the management saying they're going to add 2 or 3 and leave it up in the air to see if they're going to contend.
And now, how happy should Doc and I, as Tigers fans, feel about Chris Sale and Adam Eaton being moved outside the AL Central Division to the Red Sox and the Nationals, respectively?
Yeah, so the Tigers should definitely feel more optimistic about their chances now. The problem is still going to be, how do you replace a guy like Cameron Maben in center field, who was just a catalyst at the top of the order? But on a very general, basic level, the Tigers now, because the AL Central is weaker, the Tigers don't have to worry even about winning 90 games potentially if you think the Indians will regress a little bit, and you think, and the Indians could, because if they don't bring Napoli back, they're going to have no thunder in that lineup. And then the Twins and White Sox are in the midst of a rebuild, and the Royals traded their all-star closer, setup man, Wade Davis. So if you're a Tigers fan, there are reasons to be optimistic.
So, Dom, when we look back at these deals made by Rick Hahn and company in 2 to 3 years from now, do you think they'll still be as highly lauded?
Yeah, I think so. The problem is going to be the enigma of pitching prospects. You really don't know about pitching prospects. And the White Sox really were in more need of, let's say, position prospects. But obviously, when you get the best pitching prospect, and the best hitting prospect in the minors, you can't really shake your head at that. But I think, look at the rotation will be pretty much set in 2018 to 2019. One of those seasons, I would say 2018 is soon, depending on how Dan Dunning progresses. But you're looking at a rotation. Now, this is if you keep Quintana. Now, we've heard reports have been out there that Quintana was invited to Sox Fest, so his chances, we don't know about his trade chances or trade prospects yet. David Robertson wasn't invited, by the way. So we're going to look at a rotation. If you include Quintana, which is going to have Quintana, Rodon, Giolito, Dunning, and Kopech. So with that rotation, even if Kopech doesn't have to be an ace, and Dunning doesn't have to be an ace, who is the Nationals' first-round pick. And then you can move Carson Fulmer in the bullpen. So you can include Quintana in there in that predicament. But then if you don't include Quintana, then you could conceivably bump Fulmer in the rotation. So it's a rotation that, even though pitching prospects can be an enigma, there's so many of them now that it's not as bad. But I still think they need to find more position prospects. And if they do take Quintana, you got to look at what you're going to get from the Astros and maybe a Kyle Tucker outfield prospect that they like. And they also have to make waves. Obviously, Chris Getz and company, they have to make waves in the draft. And we'll see how they can do that. The draft is going to be bountiful again with outfield prospects. Obviously, you look at some outfield prospects like Connor Uleton. He's a 5-tool player. He's a high school athlete. It's an outfielder they could look at. And obviously, there's other guys, too, in college. Jaron Kendall, which I don't think he would fall to the White Sox at 12. But he hit .332 last year with 28 steals at Fandy. That's my only concern is with the position prospect.
Lucas Giolito, whatever you want to call him, or how you want to enunciate that last name, but he's a stud, number one pitching prospect in all of baseball, according to many Major League Baseball pundits. So you got to like him at the top of the White Sox rotation in 2018 or 19 and beyond. And then how about, you brought him up already, Dane Dunning, he's going to be a part of the rotation, maybe Jose Quintana. But answer this for me, Dom, quickly. Quintana, a part of the White Sox rotation in 2017 or no?
I'm going to say yes, but I think he's gone mid-season. I think what's going to happen is the White Sox are going to hold on to him because people are worried about his workload and his innings pitched, even for a guy that's, he's shown that he's durable, but teams like the Astros are balking at the price that the White Sox are getting. The White Sox want Francis Marquez, they want Kyle Tucker, and they want Joe Musgrove. And what they got for Eaton was
it was
exponential.
beyond expectations, right? What they got for Eaton in so many words. So, right?
Yes, and obviously what helps Quintana too is his fifth year. I mean, 5 years you're going to have. You basically signed him by acquiring him, and there's not too much quality starting pitching left on this market. So that's why I think he could move, but I think the White Sox might get something done mid-season. I don't know why I think that, but I think just because teams have balked at the price so far, and they could go down, but Rick Hahn's going to want to maximize the return, the profit they're going to get back. So they want to stack up on prospects, and they're going to embrace the process.
Dom, the White Sox still might move David Robertson, Jose Abreu, all these names from their current Major League roster before the end of the offseason. And if not, you can deal these guys leading up to the non-waiver trade deadline, in 2017. So there's a lot of possibilities still for the White Sox to deal a few guys from their Major League rosters, so including Jose Quintana. And, Michael Natelli, my guest before you, Dom, had brought up David Robertson maybe going to the Nationals. The Nationals still might be wheeling and dealing the White Sox as well. Nats could use that late-inning arm such as David Robertson, who's been good. And White Sox, seemingly are willing to give up the likes of David Robertson and other vets on their Major League roster. So there could be a fit there. Now, as I said, I see those two teams still wheeling and dealing. Now, I wanted to turn our attention to the Tigers, the reason for this Tigers Talk podcast, and look at who they might still be willing to deal. Now, do you think they will end up moving the Tigers, their Chris Sale-esque starting arm of Justin Verlander, and their Adam Eaton-esque impact outfielder, JD Martinez, this offseason?
I don't foresee that. I think if they get blown away by who's able to eat up some of Verlander's contract, obviously, J.D. Martinez, when his contract is up, and his salary arbitration deal is up, you're going to see some more traction right now on the trade front. But we haven't seen so much. We haven't heard too much about it. It's probably been under the radar with the Tigers are discussing with other teams. We know the Giants need an outfielder, but the Tigers, I think, are more. They kind of threw fans and even pundits for a screwball when they traded Maven, and people thinking we're going to unload some of the payroll. That's a sixth for the Tigers. So obviously that happened, but I think now that what they've seen the rest of the division doing, they're going to be more likely to stand pat, and they might move or might cut minor players. Obviously, they might add someone from AAA. We'll see if someone like Dean Green gets a look now. They might use some of that fringe talent and bring them up, and they could cut some arbitration guys. So who'll be due for arbitration? And obviously, the contracts, Verlander and Cabrera contracts, we know Cabrera and Verlander, those are still too big. And the reason why the White Sox were able to wheel and deal was because of the friendly contracts.
Yeah, for both Sale. For both Sale and Eaton, huh?
They were able to flip, Hector Santiago for Adam Eaton, and then sign him to an extension that was one of the best contracts Rick Hahn has made, and that's not without saying Chris Sale's contract too, and Jose Quintana. Those are some great contracts. And Avila mentioned that too, that it's different, and it's going to be more difficult for the Tigers to move guys. JD not so much, but now we look at a team where the Tigers that should be able to compete in that division.
So, Dom, some quick hitters here. Over or under 50% as part of Big Vito's over or under 50% of the Tigers deal Justin Verlander, and then also over or under 50% for the Tigers dealing JD Martinez this offseason.
I would say about a 20% chance Verlander gets dealt, and I would say a little bit under 50%, 40% JD Martinez gets dealt.
Okay. And now the Tigers standing pat the rest of this offseason, over or under 50%?
I would give the Tigers an over 50. I'll give them a 60% chance that they're going to stand pat. I do foresee minor moves, though, on the horizon. Obviously, they missed out on Jason Castro. Was a good pickup for the Twins. We'll see if they get. Brad Ziegler, that bullpen could be. We'll see what they do with that bullpen. Where you want to move guys, if you want to bump Justin Wilson or trade Justin Wilson. which I've heard that he's been getting some traction as well. So I think obviously in the free agent market, there's going to be more lesser deals. Like I said, Brad Ziegler, I could see. As far as, position players, they might have to, bite the bullet there with some of their contracts. And there's no reason to trade. To me, there's no reason to trade JD Martinez.
Just for the heck of it, right? You better get something good, Dom. And with that, we do have to let you go, Dom Chirco, but thank you for all your time as usual, me, Hermano, and we'll talk to you again soon on Tigers Talk. All right?
All right. Yep. Thanks for having me, Vito.
And back on episode number 70 of Tigers Talk. A lot of fun content there from Dom about his White Sox, about the Tigers, what he sees them doing. And he said under 50% for Verlander. He labeled him being a 20% chance for being dealt. JD Martinez, he said, don't just deal him. And I agree with them, even though what they did with Maben, dealing him really for nothing that could help out the team and really, just having that be a pure salary dump. They're not going to do that with JD Martinez, and they shouldn't, as Dominic pointed out. And he loves what the White Sox did, getting what they got for Chris Sale and Adam Eaton big time as well. And he brought up the possibility of the Tigers adding some relief pitchers and maybe also dealing one of theirs. And now, most notably, as Don brought up, Justin Wilson, the left-hander who I like for the Tigers in 2017, maybe they'll deal him, and maybe to Kyle O'Connor's Cubbies. Kyle O'Connor is our next guest on episode 70 of Tigers Talk, and we'll ask him about how he celebrated the Cubs winning, how great the feeling was, and just about the Cubs deal as well for Wade Davis to be their closer in 2017. We'll be right back with Kyle O'Connor as well.
Thanks, Vito. Just want to tell everybody to support our fine project and Vito's podcast. Just go to our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. Click through the banner links, support the sponsors. That's how we keep the lights on, the mics hot here in our Sterling Heights studio, and that's how Vito can get the podcast and talk to great guests. Thanks to everybody that's been supporting the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Visit our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com.
And now, joining me on episode number 70 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company is a guest of mine that's been on many times now, and Cubs reporter Kyle O'Connor of 5widesports.com. Kyle, how's it going?
Doing well. How are you, Vito?
Very well, and I know you've been doing very well for a long time, and we got to first and foremost talk about your Cubbies winning it. And Kyle, when the Cubs recorded the final out of the Fall Classic, was the emotion that ran through your body as good as you thought it would be?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's still kind of hazy. I just completely lost it. It was just a nightmare of an entire evening. I mean, I'm sure to fans of either not the Indians or Cubs, it was a really good game and it was a lot of fun. But for us, it was terrible. I mean, it was just absolutely devastating. So when it finally ended, I mean, it was unreal. I remember my dad FaceTiming me. I remember my wife jumping up and down. Other than that, I don't remember a whole lot just because, I mean, it happened quick. Even then, I was half expecting, Martinez to go yard. I mean, but I'm glad. Obviously, it worked out the way it did, and I've been on such a high since then. The Notre Dame being terrible hasn't bothered me, and losing two of my favorite players hasn't really bothered me either.
Yeah, it's a high that's hard to get off of, I know, with the Cubbies winning for all of you Cubs fans. And then the Cubs go out and get a legitimate closer in Wade Davis from the KC Royals, kind of helping out our team here, Doc and I's, and the Tigers by Wade Davis going to another club outside of the AL Central. Now, the Cubs had to get rid of outfielder Jorge Soler, though, in order to get Davis. Was it worth it, in your opinion, Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I'm not the best guy to ask because I'm a massive Jorge Soler fan. I have been for a while. I'm just a really big fan. So it really sucked to see him leave. I get it. I mean, they don't have enough at-bats for everybody. I mean, even now, with the roster as it sits, one of the best young players in the game, and Javi Baez, he doesn't have anywhere to play. So, I mean, they still have too many bats. So it was going to be really hard for Jorge to find the bats. In Kansas City, not only can he slide into the corner outfield spot, he can also DH there where he has a lot of trouble in the field. And the Cubs will already have one of those in Kyle Schwarber. So, yeah, it was a good move. I get why they did it. It is a little disappointing that you're only going to get 1 year out of him, though. And then the Cubs are pretty much going to be in the same position this time next year, looking for a closer again.
Yeah, buying or going for closers year to year is tough. I have realized it as a Tigers fan, not being sure who your closer is going to be, but at least they know he's good enough. And now, as Cubs closer, how good do you think he will be pitching in a much tougher environment where there's, a ton of expectations to win? And I know he pitched in for the winning ball club, but this is still a different feel, different environment, right, in Chicago than KC.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll be much of an issue. I think his only issue is going to be health. Going from AL to NL where you don't have to deal with the DH is obviously going to help him. And really the only thing that can really get you in trouble with Wrigley is when you give up a lot of home runs, and he gives up no home runs. I mean, dude, it's just really, really, really hard to get the ball out of the park. So I think he's going to be fine. As long as he's healthy, he's going to be lights out for the year. I really have no worries there. Like I said, really my only downside is, will he stay healthy? And the second part of that is I highly doubt they'll be signing him to an extension. So at this time next year, likely going to be in the same position, looking for a pitcher, unless somebody in-house like C.J. Edwards proves he can take over that role.
It is Kyle O'Connor, 5widesports.com, chatting with me right now and has joined me courtesy of the Top Cat Sales phone line. And you're happy about the Cubs winning it all. And also the Cubs getting Wade Davis. And then also you got to be happy about the fact that the crosstown rival Chicago White Sox are enduring a deconstruction project. And it has seen the club's left-handed ace, Chris Sale, be jettisoned out of town now. How happy does that make you feel as a Cubs fan, seeing that being done, the deconstruction being done by the White Sox?
Well, I mean, as someone who doesn't like the White Sox, I was kind of liking the way they were doing it, just staying in the middle and not getting any better, not really ever being a threat to win the World Series, but not bad enough to really bottom out and rebuild. I think if I was a White Sox fan, I would be thrilled with what's happening right now. It doesn't need to be done. You still have to move Quintana, Robertson. You can even look to move Abreu, Frazier. They have a lot of pieces, and I think all of them should go. Absolutely every one of them. Lose 100 games the next couple of years, and they'll be in position to be really, really good shortly after that. Where they were, it just didn't make any sense. They didn't have the pieces to make a World Series run. It wasn't going to happen. But they were just good enough to where it's like, should we do it? And that's a real dangerous place to be in any sport. You can see primes be wasted, which you were seeing with Chris Sale. You can see years turn into a handful of years go by to where you're just not going anywhere. And if I was a White Sox fan, I'd be really excited. They're a handful of years away, maybe even shorter than that. We saw the Cubs do it quicker. They could be 3-4 years away from being a really good team.
So I can tell what you're getting at, Kyle. You wanted to see them continue to be a middle-of-the-pack squad, because when that's the case, you can go
be irrelevant,
right, and then you can go a long time and go 108 years maybe without winning a fall classic, as your Cubbies sadly did. But now everything is glorious in Chicago Cubsville, and you know what? White Sox, I guess it's going to enhance that crosstown rivalry for you guys, right? I mean, that's the positive of it for you as a Cubs fan and other Cubbies fans, I would imagine, if you want to, find a positive out of the White Sox rebuilding and doing the right thing in rebuilding for their club long term.
Yeah, I mean, the crosstown Cubs are always going to be fun. I think people outside of the area maybe overestimate the rivalry between the White Sox and the Cubs. Chicago is a Cubs city. I mean, that's really not up for debate. You saw it with the parade. Chicago is always going to be a Cubs city. And a lot of Sox fans will openly tell you that they know that they're the little brother. They know they're at the afterthought. But when they come together to play, it's nice when both teams are good, which I think we're a handful of years away from both teams being good. And obviously the chance of them meeting in a World Series, I mean, that'd be unreal. Especially now with both teams having World Series under their belts, in the past, what are we at? Pretty much a decade now. Both of them have won a World Series. So if they met in the World Series, I think that'd be great. And again, I as much as I hate the White Sox, I do think their fans should be excited with the way things are going. And if they finish this off and move those last few pieces, they're going to have a heck of a young stable of dudes ready to roll in a short amount of time. And that's the other thing is, when the Cubs were rebuilding, they were getting guys that were still waiting away. A lot of these guys the White Sox are bringing in, they're going to be ready a little sooner. Some of those arms from the Nats, and obviously the big boys from Boston, we're not talking 5-6 years down the line. They'll be ready sooner than that. And with the AL Central kind of up for grabs after the Indians, and we'll have to see if they even have staying power, they're in a pretty good position moving forward, and the AL Central should be fun this next handful of years.
Yeah, Lucas Giolito, him, being at the top of the White Sox rotation in the near future, perhaps, and then Yoan Moncada. Those guys are scary guys when you look at them from across town as you are doing, and will have to do as a Cubbies fan. So they should make a very big impact when they do reach the majors. And it was last in 2005 that the White Sox made the World Series and won the World Series. And it might be a few more years until they do so, if they even do so again in the near future. But it would be an epic World Series at that, as you already noted, Kyle, if they could meet up in a fall classic. And you never know. I mean, the Cubs have won a World Series now, so you never know if it really could happen, the White Sox and Cubs squaring off.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be fun. And but at the end of the day, as a Cubs fan, they're still in the AL, so I really don't care. Like, when these big names, let's say Aroldis Chapman, I was thrilled he went to the Yankees. I would have been thrilled if he went to the White Sox. As long as these guys stay out of the NL, same with the Chris Sale trade, and even, big names like you mentioned that are going to be coming back to the White Sox that are going to be good. At the end of the day, they're still in the AL, and it doesn't really matter to us. If we have to see those studs once we get to the World Series, we'll cross that bridge. But those, 6, 7, 8 games a year, and then the possibility of the World Series, it will be fun. But I really try not to worry about what the White Sox are doing a whole lot. I want them to lose, obviously. I am a Cubs fan. But if they are good, it's not the end of the world for me. Hopefully the Cubs are playing well, and they're also set up for a while. So it's fun times in Chicago. Maybe not with the other sports, but as far as baseball goes, people should be having fun.
Yeah, I can tell you're staying in your lane. You'll let the White Sox do what they want to do and have to do in the AL. And I know it would, if the White Sox ever get good, it would make it so much more worth it for you as a Cubs fan if the Cubs defeated the White Sox in the Fall Classic. Then you would care about the White Sox.
Yeah, but if
you
they
could
lost
beat
to them, that'd be a nightmare.
You would have to deal with it. They would no longer be the little brother, as you noted, too. And also, as you pointed out, you know what? The South Side is nothing on Wrigleyville. We know that much. We can sum that up from what we've talked about today regarding
Guaranteed
the two teams.
Field.
Yeah, I mean, another name already, another sponsor already on to the name for the ballpark that the White Sox play in. So, I mean, there's that in comparison, and that's the expansion of the gap between the teams, too, right there, I guess. And you brought up the AL Central really quick about the AL Central. Now, from a Tigers perspective, do you feel that the White Sox rebuilding and the Royals dealing Wade Davis to the Cubs has caused the Tigers to stay relatively quiet on the trade front this offseason?
Yeah, I think the Tigers are going to be in pretty good shape. The Royals are always going to be the Royals. They're going to be there. I don't expect them to run away with the division. I think they'll certainly be there. The White Sox are probably going to be pretty bad these next couple of years. If you look at other teams, the Tigers, the big bats are obviously going to be there. The bullpen's going to have to really kind of come together, and the front end pitching is going to have to be consistent. I mean, they ran into some troubles with some pitching consistencies last year. And then you have the Indians where, I look at that roster, I understand why they're good. There's not a whole lot of bats they have that scare me, especially if they don't land like Encarnacion, which I don't think they will. They are very much built for the postseason, the Indians are, to where you can really stretch out that bullpen. You can let those front-end starters kind of pitch even more often, even though they had a couple that weren't healthy. But you obviously can't do that over the course of a regular season. So I think the AL Central will be very competitive next year if either the Tigers, Royals, Indians, really any of those three teams wouldn't surprise me if they won it. I would be surprised if the Twins or White Sox were even relevant, to be honest.
Yeah, it sounds like you think the Indians overachieved, and I share the sentiment, by the way, about the Tribe reaching the Fall Classic. Yeah, and then they don't spend money. They're not going to get Edwin Encarnacion more than likely, as you noted already too, Kyle, because they're not willing to open up the checkbook. If they did, they could get him, upgrade their lineup, and you get Michael Brantley back as well, who was their all-star outfielder, their best hitter before 2016 as well. So getting him back, and then they get Encarnacion, then the Tribe have a chance to maybe repeat their fall classic trip. Now, I don't see it happening, and you just gotta hope the best for the Tigers in 2017. And best of luck to your Cubbies, to you, Kyle, and we'll chat once again down the line here before the season starts up.
So I appreciate it. Good luck to your Tigers as well. Keep those White Sox down.
Oh, we will. Thank you, Kyle. And that was my buddy, Kyle O'Connor, our Cubs reporter on Tigers Talk. He's been on a handful of times. He might be the most frequent guest at this point. I know Ryan Ford's been on a lot too, Aaron McMahon, but in recent memory, it's been Kyle O'Connor, Doc, hasn't it?
Man, could you just imagine the offseason that they're having over there at the Cubs? My goodness. But a couple of their guys have taken offers elsewhere. You got to look at situations where, when a team has success like the Cubs, you're going to start to lose some pieces, and some guys have earned contracts with the Cardinals and the like. And so, hey,
yes,
it happens.
Dexter Fowler went to the Cardinals, you're right, to the rival Cardinals in the NL Central. So that's a big loss for them too, Doc.
And if you look at a squad that, if you're looking at a new way of kind of improving your ball club, what the Yankees did with Aroldis Chapman is outstanding. They get, the Vito Chirco Podcast 5-Star Award of the Week. You know why?
Yeah.
You lose Aroldis Chapman, and when you get him, you got to remember that there were some things swirling around his personal life that kind of made his stock low when they first acquired Aroldis Chapman. Then they trade him off to the Cubs for a haul for a couple of prospects. Now he goes to the Cubs for a half a season. He's a rental. Now in the offseason, they sign him back. They get the player that they want. They sign him to a massive deal in terms of the money spent for a closer, but you also got the prospects from the Cubs. So it's a situation where Cashman realized, okay, you know what, for this season in 2016, we just got to let him go and try to build for the future. But that's how you want to do it. Get the guy back, let him go for some prospects, and when you look at what the Tigers are doing, they're struggling to get anything because they're not in the position of strength. And when you have, pieces in place, you got to move them at the right time. And so that there's an art to that. And, in order to make a deal, you have to have a willing trade partner, and Al Avila can sit here and talk to us to the high heavens and saying, hey, I want to make a deal. But if nobody is going to work with you on the other end, you have a problem. Now, I teased something earlier in the podcast before the fine guest came on. So we're going to play a round of Doc's over-under. So if I were to tell you 1,200 strikeouts over-under for the team in 2016 for the Detroit Tigers, what would you say?
Now, that is for the hitters?
Entire season, 1,200 strikeouts. Over-under did the team have in 2016?
Once again, for the hitters or pitchers, though?
Entire team. Total,
so both. Okay. I could see... that's a tough one. I'm not going to do what my guests have done to me in the past. So I will pick. Okay, I will get off the fence. I am going to say, with that question of yours directed at me, I'm going to go safe, I guess. I am going to say under.
Wrong. In 2016, the Detroit Tigers met a number in their history that they've never done before.
Oh, you were asking me what happened in 2016?
Last year,
okay,
the Tigers struck out 1,303 times.
That's a lot. It's hard to repeat, yeah.
And so what the Tigers said and what Brad Ausmus came out and said is, listen, in the upcoming season, we got to strike out less. Yep. And never was that more evident than in the series versus Atlanta, the biggest series of the season, to get to the postseason, to have a chance. What the Tigers do, they struck out a bunch, especially in the final 3 games. So in the upcoming season, if they're going to make a change, they're going to have to also in that lineup get a lot more consistent hitting and not strike out so much. I mean, it's a boom or bust offense, but when you strike out 1,303 times collectively, that's a huge problem. You can't have success striking out at that clip. And I know you're shocked when you said, wow, when I read it, I was like, 1,300 strikeouts across the board.
But a lot of strikeouts.
But when you look at what the Tigers did versus Atlanta, they were striking out galore. I mean, that pitcher that struck him out, I believe, 10 times was a nobody.
Well, Miguel Cabrera struck out against that pitcher, too. Yeah, the guy who was not their closer, because Jim Johnson was their closer. They had Ian Kroll, another guy that came in, hard-throwing guy. Cabrera couldn't hit him. But it wasn't just Cabrera. That was the problem. And you gave me Doc's over-under. I got to give you Big Vito's over-under now. It's big. See, you're just Doc. This is Big Vito's over-under. So over-under that total amount of strikeouts in 2017 now.
Oh, no doubt it's going to be under.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I was being conservative, too, saying I think even perhaps under 1,200. it might not even reach close to 1,200 because usually when you have an astronomically high season one year, the next year, it's not even close. And you got to believe some of those bats are just going to produce better. And maybe if they're healthier, they look better out there and they do better as well, statistically. So meaning they might strike out less. And I think they will.
The Braves pitcher was unheralded. Aaron Blair.
Aaron Blair, former starting pitching prospect. And then he does that.
10 Tigers in 6 innings.
Had a what ERA before that? Like a 6 ERA. Do you remember that? Very bad ERA. Comes out there, gets the job done for the Braves in a situation where the Tigers had to win, losing those games against the Braves. Horrible games to lose. And then, Tehran, we know what he did in the final game.
12!
Yeah, a lot of cases. And he's a legit, ace caliber arm. But Verlander pitches for you. Pitches great. And you can't score.
27 strikeouts in the final 2 games.
Yeah.
27!
You're not going to win against anybody, and then you do it against the Braves in the final series of the season. That's a way you set yourself up to lose and to miss out on the playoffs. Tigers did, and they deserve to miss out on the playoffs based on how they played in that 3-game set against the Braves to end the season, which, why were they playing the Braves anyways? But we saw that on the schedule, really the beginning of the season, and then as the season progressed, we had thought that was a great opportunity for the Tigers to get into the playoffs. We thought they're going to win 2 out of 3, at least, if not sweep the Braves. Then the Braves do what they did to the Tigers, preventing the Tigers from getting in. Isn't that something? It came down to that, and the Braves were the team that, helped out with eliminating the Tigers, and then the other teams winning, remember, the Bo Sox and other teams too, that didn't help them out, and then it was on them, though. The reason why they didn't make the playoffs, they had to take care of business against the Braves, and guess what? They did it, and all those strikeouts, I don't think in totality that amount will happen again. And you got to say under almost to play safe as well for the Tigers. And I would hope that's a key to success. As Brad Ausmus, that's a good point he brought up. I got to give him some credit where credit is due. Don't always love giving Brad Ausmus credit, but he is right. If you K less than 1,200 times or less than 1,000 times, let's say, you enhance your quality of play. You help out your team in getting to where it wants to get. And by striking out that many times, you hurt yourself significantly. And think about it. If they didn't strike out that many times and had better at-bats at times in key situations, guess where they would have been? They would have been in the playoffs.
This is bad.
That is bad. How many times they struck out indeed last year? They have to cut down on it. Brad Ausmus is definitely correct. And if they do cut down on it, like I said, they have a better chance to make the playoffs in 2017. And now if they stand pat, will they stand pat at this point? Will they still make a move or two? Doc, another Big Vito's over-under. And I think to end our discussion on this week's podcast, and the over-under for you is over-under 50% that the Tigers stand pat the rest of the offseason. And when I say standing pat, I mean making a trade. Now, they might make a free agent move, but...
Under.
Okay.
I
How much under?
I think that there's going to be maybe a 35% chance they don't make one other move. I think that as the season comes closer, there's got to be something that can be worked out, especially along the way. If it ends up not being, then I'll be wrong, but we'll see if they do try to actually spin it where nothing happens and it's the same lineup minus a couple guys.
After what Al Avila said at his end-of-the-season press conference, how bad would that look for him if they don't make a trade?
Especially with Dave Dombrowski making the move of the season already. Again, letting go of the prospects, adding pieces, and the White Sox were able to unload and maybe position themselves in the future. So we'll see what the Tigers are able to do.
The White Sox reaped the benefits. Then the Bo Sox, they not only get Chris Sale, they got Tyler Thornburg from the Brewers. They had to give up Travis Shaw, which means Pablo Sandoval now is their starting third baseman, it looks like, to start opening day in 2017. And he's a guy that has been overweight, has been a bust for them so far since he joined the Red Sox. And I saw a picture of Sandoval. He actually lost some weight, and not just losing weight as Bruce Rondon supposedly did. Sandoval legitimately lost some weight. So that's good to see for the Bo Sox. He can be their starting third baseman and maybe be productive, actually, at third base. But my point was the Red Sox went out and got a lot of things already done for themselves. And they signed Mitch Moreland, which means they might not go out and get now a DH or a true DH to fill the void of Big Papi. It's a big void to fill. But yeah, Dave D, as you said, he went out, got the job done so far for his Bo Sox, positioning them as favorites in the American League, in my opinion, too. Now, Tigers, where are they? They're not favorites, and they didn't do anything to get themselves better for the future yet. So they're still middle of the pack, which is something you don't want to really be in. The White Sox were toying with that. So what did they do? They traded away Chris Sale and Adam Eaton, and they got Yohan Moncada. Red Sox giving him up. They had you to get Chris Sale. And when you get him in return, you're also winning the deal. That's why that was a win-win deal for the White Sox getting him and the Red Sox getting Chris Sale. Because you don't pull the trigger on a Chris Sale deal unless you get that top prospect. And he's been labeled as the number one prospect in all of baseball, that Yoan Moncada. He is a future Robinson Cano type of hitting second baseman. That means an all-star, year in, year out almost. And that's why you deal Chris Sale. The White Sox rightfully did, but the Bo Sox also rightfully traded Yoan Moncada. And that was in pure Dave D fashion, giving up that good of a prospect haul to get a player that could impact his major league roster right away in Chris Sale.
Detroit, Boston is you got to get the ticket next year. You could have in a weekend Fulmer versus Porcello. You could have David Price versus Justin Verlander. You could have Chris Sale versus Jordan Zimmerman. You could have yourself a great weekend either way. If it matches up that way, if it goes 3 versus 3 and you get it that right, I probably would go to all 3 games.
That's what you want to see. That's marquee baseball matchups all weekend long right there. And Chris Sale hasn't won a Cy Young Award yet. Maybe should have. Maybe can in the future. I think he still might win one. David Price and Rick Porcello have both won a Cy Young. And Porcello maybe not deservingly as much as David Price, but still 2 Cy Young winners and Chris Sale. And Chris Sale is really the best pitcher of those 3, and he hasn't won a Cy Young. I mean, what do you say to that? Is he the best?
And I say the Tigers have success against him. They've roughed him up a lot, so it's not a bad situation, in that matchup. So
they might be missing him then from the AL Central Division. We talked about how good it is for the Tigers to get him outside the division, to get Adam Eaton outside the division, but maybe Chris Sale they wanted inside the division, pitching for the White Sox still, as they have had a pretty good matchup with him in the past, beating him up at times, and now he can't be cutting up the White Sox uniforms anymore. He's got a new team whose uniforms he can cut up. Think about that, how he that's how it benefits him, this trade. Gets to cut up those Red Sox uniforms now, is my point. But I was asking you, of David Price, Rick Porcello, and Chris Sale, who's the best starting pitcher of those 3? I mean, I think it's Sale, and he hasn't won a Cy Young.
Exactly, and if Rick Porcello can continue to improve, he could continue and maybe have another back-to-back 20-win season. I'd say Rick Porcello has probably the higher upside, but Chris Sale, solid pitcher. I mean, that's a solid rotation all around. It's a tough question. So it's a rotation that's formidable. It's probably going to do some things for that Boston team.
And then Clay Buchholz at the very back end of the rotation. Drew Pomeranz, who they acquired close to the trade deadline. He's been an all-star. Pomeranz, not the greatest down the stretch in the Bo Sox rotation, but those are the guys at the back end of your rotation. And then Stephen Wright, the knuckleballer, who the Tigers, remember, they ballooned his ERA after beating him up. He can be a 5th starter, though. Pomeranz can be a 4th starter. Clay Buchholz maybe can be even better than that if he really pitches up to his standards from a few years ago, let's say, because he has it in him, and if he realizes some of that, what he once had in him, guess what? That's as you said, a formidable, not only 1 through 3, but a formidable 1 through 5 in the rotation. So, well, much love to the Red Sox, what they did. They were the winners, but not more than the White Sox. I would say as much as the White Sox. Rick Hahn and company in the White Sox front office got the deals they wanted, and you have to commend them for doing so. And that's why the White Sox and Red Sox were by far the biggest winners. And you could say, Doc, and tell me if you agree with me here, that the White Sox and Red Sox were equally winners of the deadline, of the winter meetings. I wouldn't say that the Red Sox won more than the White Sox.
No, they both did a great job. Exactly right. Very good point. It's going to be interesting to see now as the offseason progresses what the Tigers do. But Boston and Chicago White Sox, 2 teams that 2 squads that greatly improved themselves, and we'll see how they do going forward in the upcoming season. But definitely Boston has a lot more to lose in the upcoming season. Dave D has really rolled the dice and has said, okay, here we are. I'm pushing my stack to the middle. Let's see what happens.
Can Dave D win with a big market ball club? He's never had the luxury of running a big market ball club. Now he does. Didn't with the Tigers, didn't with the Marlins, won with the Marlins, never won with the Tigers, giving up all those prospects. But remember, Tigers gave up Andrew Miller, Cameron Maybin, guys that were top-notch prospects in all of baseball when he gave them up to get Miguel Cabrera and Dontrelle Willis from the then Florida Marlins. And remember, it backfired for the Marlins. So getting all these prospects doesn't always work out for these teams that are rebuilding, trying to get younger to become more competitive for the future. Didn't work out for the Fish there in Florida, now the Miami Marlins. So getting that great of a haul doesn't always guarantee you success long-term in so many words. So the White Sox still have to be leery of what can happen using those prospects that then will become major leaguers, and some more in the near future than others there on the south side of Chicago. Now, I wanted to make one other quick point about the Tigers and what's happening with the White Sox trading all their pieces off. The Royals trading Wade Davis. I think it has silenced the Tigers' efforts to move players from their major league roster. I think that's why they've stayed relatively quiet on the trade front, Doc. I think they've adjusted because of that. And I think almost you could say rightfully so they've adjusted because they have seen what the White Sox have done now during the winter meetings, rehauling, revamping their roster for the future. The Royals dealing Wade Davis. I think it's pinpointed to the Tigers that they have a chance to win the AL Central in 2017. And that's why I think the Tigers have pivoted almost from their stance to start the offseason and have gone in this different direction of standing pat, largely. Doc, what do you think? Do you think it has affected the Tigers' perspective with making moves?
Well, to your point, I think the fact of the matter is, like I said earlier, is that you have to be, you definitely come out and you realize that the Tigers want to shed payroll. They probably look at the strikeout numbers that I brought up and they go, okay, we can't be a boom or bust kind of team. It's not going to help you with going forward and earning success in the postseason and having a long playoff push. So what the Tigers are looking at is, okay, what can we do here? And so they said, okay, we're going to float out the names of Verlander. We're going to float out the names of Jose Iglesias. We're going to float out names of JD Martinez. They want to trade them, but because of what Al Avila said, the offers coming back were terrible. They were trying to, people were trying to get them on the cheap, like a garage sale. And so that makes, obviously the Tigers go, ooh, we might not be able to come, make some deals because the offers aren't that great. So they don't want to look like they're getting punked. They don't want to give these guys away. They need talent back to appease the fan base and for Al Avila not to get himself fired, because you let go of Justin Verlander for a nobody, you're going to look like the worst general manager of all time, and you're going to get yourself fired. So I think Al Avila is his number one enemy, and the other squads were just able to because of the biggest problem that the Tigers have is the minor league system. You can't, if they had a couple prospects that they might be willing to add, like if they wanted to make a deal and maybe upgrade a little bit, you might have to throw in a Jimenez. You might have to throw in a Jacoby Jones with a Verlander to make a move. So, but the Tigers don't have a whole heck of a lot of grade A talent in the minors. And so they're trying their absolute best to acquire talent and improve that minor league system. So it might be a situation where you just work through the draft and forsake earning trades and making it happen because it just might not work out. You just have to start the process of drafting well, getting success in the minors, and then maybe you could also make some moves that way as well and just ride it out.
And for the Tigers, with the lack of a deep farm system, it's not worth it to deal guys, really the young guys and the top prospects in their farm system for guys that can help out their major league roster at this point. And it's backfired for other teams, such as the Red Sox, who got Pomeranz actually from the Padres, who had an all-star first half with the Padres pitching in the rotation, and for himself, the first time really pitching full-time in a rotation in the majors. And that backfired for the Red Sox, getting him. So it doesn't always work out going out and getting major league ready talent. That's why these teams do deal for the prospects, and why the Tigers right now should be looking to do that more than dealing from within their farm system, Doc, to sum it up. And with that, as I look across at you, thank you very much for all your time. Happy holidays, and we'll say it again because we have another podcast before Christmas and New Year's. And if you don't listen to that podcast, so happy holidays to all of you. And thanks once again for tuning in, and tune in next week as well to what will be episode 71 of Tigers Talk.
You can follow Vito at Vito Jerome on Twitter. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. See everybody next week.
Adios.